We have a special surprise for you today. It is my pleasure to introduce my friend Clay Hebert, a keynote speaker, marketing strategist, coach, and storyteller. For a decade, Clay led teams at Accenture, the world's largest consulting firm, solving complex problems for global Fortune 500 companies. He left corporate America to complete the most selective MBA program in the country. He was one of only 9 people to learn directly from marketing expert Seth Godin for 6 months. Today, Clay helps leaders, executives, entrepreneurs, and nonprofits tell better stories, fund their dreams, grow their companies, and do the work that matters. He speaks on marketing, growth, and storytelling to clients ranging from Accenture to Zappos, and he's trained entrepreneurs, corporate executives, and even senior leaders at the Pentagon. Clay has helped 175 projects raise over $75 million on combined, I imagine, on crowdfunding platforms Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Forbes calls him one of the next generation of business and media influencers. He was recently named one of Entrepreneur Magazine's 50 most daring entrepreneurs, along with Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. Now, all of that was kind of a tease, because he's not here today to talk about crowdfunding or entrepreneurship. He's here today to talk about how to clearly and confidently introduce yourself, better tell your story, improve your personal brand, and show us how to turn any conversation into a real connection. So that's the official bio. Now, I've known Clay for years now. We're part of a community called Mastermind Talks. It's very exclusive. There are a lot of really, really great people in it. And through connecting at that community, we've had a lot of conversations. We've sat down in person. We've exchanged ideas. We even co-chaired a roundtable on gamification and course completion in the development of online courses. And in every single interaction I've had with him, I've been struck by how brilliant he is, how present he is, how kind and caring and generous he is. And you guys have seen this because, 99 out of 100 times when a speaker comes to speak, he's sitting in the green room, comes out, speaks, and takes off. But he's been milling around talking to all of you. So he's really excited to be here, and I'm very, very excited that you all get to meet him. So giant, giant round of applause for Clay Hebert. Thanks for being here. Thanks, all right. You have the floor.
So, what do you do? That's the question we get asked a lot. A few times a day. You've probably been asked that question already today. Do you have a great answer for that question? I didn't. It was 2013, and I was living in New York City, and a friend of mine told me about a conference to attend here in San Diego. And I love San Diego. I live here now. I live about 2 blocks away now. I love San Diego, so it was not tough to twist my arm to get me to come to San Diego for this conference. So I didn't even really ask many questions. I just said, I'm in. I didn't know much about this conference. It was up in Rancho Bernardo, 2013. And my friend Rachel said, the speakers will be amazing, the attendees are amazing, just go. So I signed up, I went, I didn't know much about it. Showed up at the conference. After the first speaker, they said, why don't you turn around and introduce yourself to the person behind you? And so I did. I followed instructions, I turned around, and he said, so what's your name? What do you do? I said, well, my name's Clay Hebert, and I grew up in Wisconsin. Then I went to college at the University of Minnesota. I started working for Accenture, and then I traveled. I went to Boston, Philadelphia. I like Breaking Bad, but I don't love Breaking Bad. And I just had this long, rambling, drawn-out introduction. I covered every city I lived in, every flavor of ice cream I liked. And sort of to stop myself, I said, what are you doing? To stop myself, I said, so what's your name? What do you do? And he was just as cool as Fonzie. And he goes, well, my name is Matt, and I run a little software company. I said, that's cool. I'm into software. I'm into startups. What's it called? Maybe I've heard of it. And again, just as cool as Fonzie, he goes, it's called Automatic. In that moment, I knew who I was talking to. I knew I was talking to Matt Mullenweg, the founder of Automatic, creator of WordPress, the open source software that I had used to build many websites, power my own website, the software that powers 26% of the internet, probably 70% of the sites in this room. I knew who Matt Mullenweg was, and he was sort of a hero of mine, sort of an internet hero, not like a Michael Jordan, LeBron James poster on the bedroom wall sort of hero, But today I sort of wish I maybe did have a poster of Matt on my bedroom wall, because then I would know what he looked like. And when I realized who I was talking to, I wouldn't have looked like this. This was the exact moment that I realized I was speaking to Matt Mullenweg, one of my internet heroes, right after I completely embarrassed myself and blew my introduction. This is what it looks like when you meet your hero and you blow it. Ever since that exact moment, I've been obsessed with thinking about and finding and crafting the perfect intro and what that means, how we introduce ourselves, how we tell our stories, how we answer that question, so what do you do? And so over the last few years, I've listened for that. I've listened for people asking other people. You hear it every single day. Once you're listened for that, you can't unhear it, and you hear it every single day. You either get asked, or you ask somebody else, or you watch somebody else ask somebody else, so what do you do? So I've been studying how people answer that, and I've been working to develop a better way, a better framework. Because I never wanted to feel like this. I left that interaction with Matt. It was very short after that. And I walked around the rest of the grounds totally embarrassed and thought, how do I never do that again? How do I never feel like this? How do I have a better, more interesting, more compelling introduction to that question, so what do you do? So I developed this framework that I call the perfect intro. So let's talk a little bit about the word perfect. Nowadays, on social media, on Instagram, there's a whole lot of talk about don't try to be perfect. Perfection is overrated. Don't strive for perfection. You know, perfect is the enemy of done, all that stuff, which I believe. If you're going to ship your book, it's never going to be perfect. You have to get the book done. But that's talking about the one big project or the one big thing. We hear things like, nobody's perfect. Don't try to be perfect. Perfection is overrated. But I actually disagree. I think perfect gets a bad rap. One of my favorite scenes from one of my favorite movies is in Good Will Hunting, when Robin Williams' character is sitting with Matt Damon's character, and Matt Damon's character is telling him about a new romance, a new woman he's dating. He said, man, this girl's perfect. And the gist of it is, Sean says, I got news for you, champ. This girl, she's not perfect. And neither are you. But maybe you're perfect for each other. So there is no perfect person. There is no perfect mate, right? Think about the perfect sunset. You all have seen not one perfect sunset. You all have seen hundreds. You haven't had one perfect meal. You've had thousands. And you haven't had one perfect kiss. You've had a few. So I think we should strive for perfect in the moment, because perfect is personal, perfect is contextual, perfect is in the moment. And as I think about the intro, I want you guys to think about the perfect conversation. If perfect is multiple, if perfect is infinite, you can have many perfect conversations. The goal of any conversation is real human connection. Before you can close the sale, before you can find a partner, before you can get the phone number, there has to be real human connection. So why don't we start there? So let's talk for a second about why introductions matter. 3 reasons. They're frequent, they're important, and they're easy to fix. They're frequent. We interact with about 3 new people per day. That's 1,000 people per year, and pretty conservatively, 50,000 in an adult lifetime. 50,000 chances to find a business partner, 50,000 chances to find a soulmate, 50,000 chances to make somebody laugh, to take a leap. It happens a lot. I love great coffee. This is my super geeky coffee setup at home. It's called a Chemex. I do a pour over. And if you think about all the things that we do every single day, some of us make coffee, right? We shower, we brush our teeth, we get dressed, we walk around, and we introduce ourselves, among other things. But if you think about the things that we do well, everything except introduce ourselves. Most of us don't walk out of the house hoping that somebody please asks us, so what do you do? We don't put our pants on backwards, we don't fall down in the shower, we don't crash our cars, but every day we crash our introductions. Number 2, they're important. This is all I have to tell you. If the guy who invented the software that powers 26% of the internet is sitting behind me at a conference, you never know who you're going to meet. And even if they're not the person, it could be their sister, their uncle, their brother, their mother. It could be anyone. You never know who you're going to meet. So introductions are important. And here's the thing. Everyone matters. Everyone's got a story. And lastly, because you're here today, they're easy to fix. I'm going to show you guys a super, super simple framework. You're not going to leave today with one perfect intro. You're going to leave with a number of perfect intros. You're going to leave with a framework to be able to design your own perfect intro anytime you want, right before you walk into any room or any dinner. So I want you to think back to college or high school when you're cramming for that big exam that maybe you procrastinated studying for the entire semester. And you're trying to fit a whole semester's worth of information into your head in one night. And usually this feeling is after maybe half a pizza, maybe a couple coffees or Red Bulls. And you have that sort of illicit thought, or at least I did, that I sure wish my friend Danny would slide the test under the door. Because if I knew the question on the test, I wouldn't just ace it, I'd finish early, right? When you're cramming and you're like, God, if I just knew what they were going to ask, I could prepare for it. Well, I'm here today to tell you the question that's going to be on the test today, tomorrow, and basically every day for the rest of your life.
What do you do?
I mean, what do you do?
It's what you do, Lebowski.
So what do you do?
What do you do?
So what do you do?
So what do you do?
What do you do, bro?
You're going to be asked that question almost every day for the rest of your life. And by the end of this hour, you're going to have a much better way to answer it. So let's talk about why we get introductions wrong. Number one, we never get taught. Number two, we get taught poorly if we get taught at all. And number three, we believe the three myths about introductions. So we never get taught, at least here in the United States. To get a driver's license, you have to sit next to some guy who smells like Big Macs and prove that you can parallel park on a hill and remember to use the emergency brake in the rain. Then you get a little plastic card that says you're allowed to operate a Toyota Prius. There's a test, there's certifications. Some of you in your work or in your past work have had tests and certifications. There's no certification for introducing yourself. We never get taught. Or, if we do get taught, we get taught poorly. What's one way that we get taught how to introduce ourselves in business? Yes, the elevator pitch. The elevator pitch. If you Google the elevator pitch, this is what comes up. Who wants some of this? Who wants to invest? Who is compelled by this kind of language? Nobody. The elevator pitch is stuck around for years, 50 years, and it's terrible. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. You're never going to get on an elevator with Richard Branson and have to pitch your business before the elevator hits the 38th floor. That's the idea that someone had when they said why you need an elevator pitch and why that's how we should introduce ourselves. It's terrible. It's 2018. Nobody wants to be pitched. Certainly not Richard Branson in an elevator. Think about what gets sold in elevators. That's not the business you're in. This is a picture of the elevator in this brand new Intercontinental. It's made by Vistal. It's the first time I've ever given this speech where the elevator is not made by the Otis Corporation. Here in the United States, the Otis Corporation makes about 75-80% of the elevators in the United States. And the reason that's interesting is because despite all the other reasons why an elevator pitch is terrible, it doesn't really happen. Has anyone had to pitch themselves in an elevator this week, this month, this year? But has anyone been asked, so what do you do? All the time. The last reason that we should eliminate the elevator pitch is because you're never going to beat the original. Otis Corporation, the namesake of Otis Elevator Corporation, is a guy named Elisha Otis. Elisha Otis did not invent the elevator, but he invented something just as important. He invented the elevator brake. before the elevator break, if the rope or the cord of the elevator broke, the elevator shaft plummeted to the bottom, and it was bad news for everyone inside. So Elisha Otis said, that's not very safe. So he invented the elevator brake. And then in the late 1800s in New York City, he gathered a bunch of people at the convention center and demonstrated his new invention. If you see the jagged edge on the side, that's his elevator brake. And he told his assistant, he said, cut the rope. And everybody gasped. And it dropped 4 feet, and his brake engaged, and he was fine. And he took a bow, and he said, all safe, ladies and gentlemen. And they all roared. That was the original elevator pitch, and none of us are ever going to beat it. So let's not even try. And lastly, we believe the 3 myths about introductions. Myth number 1 is that it's about you. Now, this one's a little confusing because when someone says, so what do you do? It seems like they care about you. But I have some bad news. They don't. They don't care about what you do. They don't care about you. They don't care about your business card yet. What they do care about is whether the thing that you do can help them or someone they know or someone they love. They're not inherently interested in you as a human being, unfortunately. But they do care if the thing that you do could maybe help them, or their sister, or their mother, or their brother. That's what they care about first and foremost. When we get asked, so what do you do? We often respond with, I am, some version of I am, usually stating some sort of role or title or industry, like I'm a nutrition coach, I'm a creative director, or I'm in politics, or I'm in plastics. I am is a great way to end a conversation. If you were to hire an intelligent alien and said, the question is, so what do you do? What's the shortest way to end the conversation? You might say, I am. Myth number 2 is that it should be 100% complete. Completeness is for resumes and job applications. Instead, you want it to be interesting. And myth number 3 is that it should be 100% accurate. Somewhere along the way, we get taught, maybe it's our 8th grade English teacher, maybe it's our mom telling us to finish everything on our plate, but we get taught that it should be accurate. Trying to be accurate forces us to use boring words that put people to sleep. So if you contrast the typical intro, which is how I screwed it up when I introduced myself to Matt Mullenweg, the typical intro is about you, it tries to be complete, and it tries to be accurate. The perfect intro is totally different. It's about who you help, and it's interesting, and it's confident. All right, you guys ready to learn how to do this? Yeah? All right. So the base formula, super quick. Now, I know I just told you that it's not about you. It's not about who you are. But the only pronoun you can respond to the question, so what do you do with, is I. So you start with I since you're the one introducing yourself, but immediately with one word, we move it off of you. It's about who you help. It's not about you, it's about who you help. So we're going to say help, and we're going to customize that in a little bit. And next is people, because I'm just going to keep it super simple for you in the beginning, and then we're going to customize it. I help people, and then the last part you have to help me out with, achieve a result. What's something that you help them do or achieve or become? That is the base formula, the simplest version of the perfect intro. I help people achieve some result. That's the whole thing. I'm done 40 minutes early. No. Let's look at some examples using the base formula. Our fearless leader, Danny. Danny could say, again, following the base formula, I help people teach their gift. Danny could say that. If someone said, so what do you do? And he's out in the lobby, Danny could smile and say, I help people teach their gift. Friend Jonathan Fields runs an entire empire called the Good Life Project. He's got a podcast, he's got a book, he's got a website, he's got a summer camp for adults. But it's all around living a good life. So he could say, I help people live a good life. Christina Rasmussen wrote a book. She lost her husband when they were in their 30s to cancer, and so she wrote a book called Second Firsts about helping people re-enter life after loss. And so what Christina says is, I help people begin again. Or Jim Quick, brain trainer to people like Will Smith and Elon Musk, but also creates courses and programs for the rest of us. He can say, I help people fall in love with their brains. And he pauses a little bit after he says the word love, and for about a picosecond, you think Jim Quick might be a dating coach, but not really, and then you realize he's a brain trainer. So the rules to start: no buzzwords. Pretend you're talking to a 6-year-old, because as Einstein said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't really understand it yourself. We try to put in these $5 buzzwords, right? Every industry has buzzwords. What are some of the buzzwords in your industry? Just yell them out. Anyone? What'd you say? Transform, right. Value, yep. Empower, yep. I empower spiritual leaders to develop heart-centered products that da-da-da-da, right? You don't have to use those big words. Use as few words and syllables as possible. If 4 syllables is kind of an interesting watermark. If it's more than 4 syllables, punch it into thesaurus.com, and magically the internet will show you a shorter, better word. Shoot for intrigue over information. This is a conversation, not a resume. It's like a tennis match. Think about it like a tennis match. If someone bats you the ball and you say, I am, you just caught the ball and ended the conversation. The goal is to get them interested. We're going to show you how to tell your story. You want to be short and concise, not drain and explain everything you do. So we have some examples from some folks in the room. Where is Mara? Is Mara here? Mara's not here? Mara's somewhere. Mara could say, I help people design healthy cultures. I help people, and then what she does is she helps them design healthy cultures, right? Michael could say, I help people project manage their career. It's kind of a clever riff, because what Michael does is he helps people who want to be project managers be better project managers, and shows them how to get jobs and how to do that. So he could say, I help people project manage their career. Or the inimitable Mitch Joel, who just joined us in the back, he could say, I help people see the future, because that's what Mitch does. Mitch reads, and he studies, and he learns, and he absorbs all the stuff, and then he translates it and decodes it for the rest of us. He decodes it so that he can tell us the future of business. He can tell us what's coming around the corner and what's next. Daryl could say, I help people jump to consulting, which is the name of his business. He teaches consultants how to be better consultants. All right? So the first part was super basic, super simple. I help people, and then whatever result you help them achieve. But now we're going to customize it, because as one of my favorite authors, Neil Gaiman, says, I've never known anyone who was what he or she seemed, or at least only that. People carry worlds within them, and all of you carry worlds within you. So you're not going to have one intro, you're going to have many. Does anyone know who this is? Big prize, if anyone except Mitch knows who this is. This guy's name is Howard Moskowitz. And in the 80s, Malcolm Gladwell tells the story, in the 80s, Ragu hired Howard Moskowitz, and they said, we want to create the perfect spaghetti sauce. It looks like some of you are having pasta and are having sauce on that pasta right now. Prego was getting whooped by Ragu, so they said, we need you to develop the perfect spaghetti sauce. So Howard polled all the people, gathered all the data, created 100 different kinds of spaghetti sauce, polled people, and the data came back all over the place. And so what he learned is there's no perfect spaghetti sauce. There's only perfect spaghetti sauces, plural. There's about 6. Because the people that like spicy don't like garden vegetable, and vice versa. We all have different tastes. And so Howard's discovery led to $600 million a year in the bottom line for Prego. And nowadays, as I look around the room, it looks like most of us remember the era when you would go to the grocery store and there were 4 kinds of spaghetti sauce, and now there's 40. That's because of Howard. But just like there's no one perfect spaghetti sauce, there's no one perfect intro. There's only perfect intros, plural. So you're going to have many. Next, customize the people, the who it is that you help. So as Danny said, I used to do a lot with Kickstarter and Indiegogo and crowdfunding. And in that era, I would say I help entrepreneurs fund their dreams. But if I was going to the XOXO conference in Portland, where they think of entrepreneurs as maybe those evil guys down in Silicon Valley, I would just change out one word and say, I help creatives fund their dreams. Or if I was headed to Brooklyn, where the people see themselves as makers and they make physical products with their hands, I would say, I help makers fund their dreams. So back to Danny's example, instead of saying, I help people teach their gift, Danny could say, I help experts teach their gift. Mara could say, I help clinicians thrive. Mitch could say, I help leaders decode the future. You guys want to hear a little ninja trick? Yeah? It's actually terribly named because ninjas don't introduce themselves by definition. You know you're going to get asked, so what do you do in these contexts? So just ask them first. Just say, tell me about you. What's got you excited? You can default to the standard, so what do you do, if you want to, but there's about 100 better questions to ask than so what do you do. But the point is, ask them first, because then you're going to figure out what they're up to, what they're interested in. And then you can use that to customize your introduction just a little bit to be a little bit more contextual and a little bit more relevant to them. So last, change help to a different verb. And this is really powerful. I want you guys to think about what is the verb that you really help people do. You could say, I show, I design, I decode, I make, I build, I teach, I give. Think about, forget all the rest of the words, forget the formula, forget the framework. Just think about what's the main verb that you do. I have a friend, Jason Gaynard, and his main thing is he connects people. He's the mastermind talks that Danny just talked about before I came out here. Yeah, he holds a conference, and yeah, he publishes books and things like that, but the main thing he does is connect people. So what's the verb? Danny could say, I show experts how to teach their gift. Or I teach, right? He's a big teacher. Jim could say, I show people the power of their brain. Daryl could say, I show consultants what's possible. Mara could say, I design inspiring work environments. The word design appears a lot on Mara's website. Or Michael could say, I design better careers. My friend Cal Fussman is one of the world's greatest living interviewers, and he could say, I decode personal stories. Or Justin Newton, who makes sure Disney World runs on time and on budget, could say, I make magic real. Or Dr. Shafali could say, I build better families. Joanna Wiebe could say, I teach people the power of words. Or Kim Harrison could say, I give leaders permission to open their hearts. But it's, like we said, it's not always I. Sometimes it's about your company. So let's talk about how to introduce your company, and it's the last word that we're going to customize. We worked reverse from the end to the beginning. So let's talk about how to introduce your company. This was a funny article in Quartz. Startups can't explain what they do because they're addicted to meaningless jargon. Startups not only have to explain what they do, they have to go raise money and raise investments and funds. And even though introducing themselves is super important, they end up with descriptions like this. We visually organize your cloud-based content for cross-platform synergy and distributed access. Who's ready to invest? Really simple, I becomes we. We build better cultures. I was teaching this to a big, huge company that's the fourth largest defense contractor in the country, in the United States. And they make planes and aircraft carriers and tanks and all these huge things. So how do you boil that down to just a few words? What we came up with was, we protect those who protect us. No buzzwords, super simple, explains what they do. There's an agency in New York named Spherical who was struggling with describing who their customer was because they service luxury independent boutique hotels, but that's a mouthful. That's, crosses the buzzword line. But they didn't want to give up on luxury, and some liked the word independent, and some liked the word boutique. So after 15 minutes of jamming, I said, let's throw out all those words and start over. What if we just said, we help the best hotels in the world tell better stories? Because that's what they do. It's not about, the social media and the website is how they do that, but what they really do is help the best hotels in the world. And by creating this aspirational category, now their customers, the luxury independent boutique hotels, who believe they're the best hotels in the world, then they mentally opt in to that category. Look at a few alternate formulas. I'm like X for Y. So Simon Manwaring is a great branding guy out of Los Angeles. And when you ask Simon what he does, he says, I'm like the wolf from Pulp Fiction, but for brands. And what's interesting about this is Simon's a sharp guy, and you've either seen Pulp Fiction or you haven't. And if you've seen the movie, and you know the scene with the wolf. There's only one scene with the wolf. It's Harvey Keitel. He comes and saves Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta when they have a dead body in the back of their car. He's in a tux, he comes from a party, and he saves the day. You either know that or you don't, and as soon as Simon says, I'm like the wolf from Pulp Fiction, and then he pauses, by the look on your face, he knows whether you've seen the movie or not. And the magic is, it doesn't matter whether you've seen the movie or not, because now he knows how to customize his introduction. If your face lights up and you smile, he knows you've seen the movie, and he goes one way. And if he doesn't, then he explains to you. But either way, if you're the brand equivalent, if you're a big brand that's got the brand equivalent of a dead body in the backseat of your car, you know you got to call Simon. He's the wolf. Or another formula, we turn X into Y. My friend Tucker Max runs a company that was recently renamed to Scribe, but right before that, it was called Book in a Box. Book in a Box, their X for what we turn X into Y is we turn ideas into books. That was top of their Google. It was even on their Wikipedia page. Because they take experts, like Danny takes experts and helps people create courses. Tucker takes busy experts, thought leaders and stuff like that, who want to get their book done but can't seem to find the time to sit and bang on the keyboard. So he created a whole process, and he created a whole company around the process to interview these experts and turn their ideas into books, to interview them, transcribe it, and actually get their book done. Or Justin, the guy from Disney, who sits in a spreadsheet all day looking at timelines and budgets, but all that makes the magic happen. All that makes sure that the rides really exist, that the Death Star ride gets created. He can say, we turn math into magic. And it doesn't have to be rigid. You can have fun with it. Because remember, it doesn't have to be accurate, and it doesn't have to be complete. One of my favorites that I've developed over the years, Doug Brackman and Randy Kelly, they say, we teach people how to meditate at gunpoint. And if you look at this picture, it looks like he's pointing a rifle at you, demanding that you meditate. That's not how it works. But it opens a loop in your brain that you want closed. It's fun. It's interesting. I did not help Neil Gaiman with this. He doesn't need any help with words. But what he says is, I make things up and I write them down. Pretty basic, pretty fun. I did help Justin with this one. I make sure the Death Star stays on budget. Now, of course, he's talking about the Death Star ride at Disney World, and that's what he does. But when he says this, people smile and they laugh, and we get closer to that human connection. My friend Sean Stevenson is a sleep expert, among other things. He wrote a book called Sleep Smarter. If anyone wants to learn how to sleep better, it's a great book. Now, if Sean followed the base formula, he might say, I help people improve health through better sleep. But even that's a little stiff and a little dry, and Sean's anything but stiff and dry. So we workshopped it a little bit and said, I put people to sleep. And then he gets to explain what that means. But I always say if I had abs like Sean's, I would switch it to I help people in the bedroom. Think about how short you can go. Gary Vaynerchuk, when asked what he does, he says, I day trade attention. 3 words. Seth Godin says, I notice things. Also 3 words. Now, of course, Seth and Gary do lots of other things. They write books and they speak and they do all this other stuff. But like we said, it doesn't have to be complete. You can get to that. This is a tennis match. It's a conversation. You're going to be there for a while, hopefully, so you can get to all that. And it's not about you. It's about who you help. So let's talk about why this works. The typical intro is about you. It's complete and it's accurate, or it tries to be. The perfect intro is about who you help, and it's interesting and it's confident. Think of it like a headline. It's like a headline for your conversation. When you see, we teach people how to meditate at gunpoint, even if you're not the kind of person who wants to meditate more or get better at meditating, it opens a loop in your brain. What do you mean at gunpoint? What do you mean, or how do you do that? That's the follow-up question they're going to ask, and as I'm going to show you, that's actually what you want. You want them to ask that question. You want them to be intrigued, but a little bit curious. It's flexible and it's infinite. Like we said, you guys are infinitely talented. I want all of you to leave with not one intro, but a framework to develop an infinite number of intros. It's unexpected. When people say, so what do you do? Automatically our brain turns off because we're thinking about the grocery list or the flight we have to catch or whatever, because what we're expecting is the kind of intro I gave Matt Mullenweg, a long, rambling, drawn-out introduction. So by saying something short and sweet and interesting, it's unexpected and it bats the ball back to them. It makes you more referable, both instantly and again afterwards. So people know who to refer to you and for what. Cameron Herold says, I help COOs double their business. Even if none of you know Cameron, you automatically know who to refer to Cameron. And almost more important than all of the words and everything we've talked about, it's the confidence and the credibility. This is just as important as the words. I was helping a literary agent friend of mine, his wife. His wife runs a really, really high-end secret group for CIOs of $25 billion companies. If you're the CIO of a measly $20 billion company, you don't even get invited to the party. So that's how exclusive this group is. And the one we came up with for her is, I run a secret society for CIOs. And then we put a little flair to it. When someone says, so what do you do? I was like, go like this and have them lean in and kind of whisper in their ear like you're Jason Bourne and say, I run a secret society for CIOs. But after working with her for a long time, she still would say, I'm like, okay, Christy, let's practice it. I said, so what do you do? And she'd go, I run a secret society for CIOs. And the way that she said it didn't match with the importance and the exclusivity of what she did. The confidence in how you say this is so important. Actors are not confident because they're actors. George Clooney doesn't deliver the lines because he's George Clooney, because there's a bunch of actors who deliver the lines like that. They deliver the lines because they know what they're supposed to say and they've practiced it. And we can all do the same thing because, like I said, we know we're going to get asked, so what do you do? This, unless you're Tyrion. But he says this, and this is funny. He says, that's what I do. I drink and I know things. This is funny, not because he came up with it on the spot. This was not improv. This was written and practiced and set, and they knew exactly how he was going to take a drink and turn his shoulder and walk away. That's why that works. You guys have the same opportunity. It gives you consistency in your personal brand. So we're going to take a slight detour here and talk about personal brand for a second. This is a quote from Tom Peters. He said, we're the CEOs of our own companies, Me Inc. To be in business today, the most important job is to be head marketer for the brand called you. It's that simple, that hard, and that inescapable. That was Tom Peters in Fast Company. Mitch does not get to answer this. Does anyone else know how many years ago this was? 30, 25, you guys are guessing a little on the high end. I like that. Yes, it was 1997, 21 years ago. He was talking about personal branding, and this was the logo for a little company named Google. But at the time, they weren't named Google, they were named Backrub, because they tracked backlinks. 1997, Tom Peters was talking about personal branding, and Google looked like this. That was a long time ago. As usual, Tom was way ahead of most of us. So when I get asked about personal branding, I get asked a lot of questions about Snapchat or Instagram stories, or what's the platform, or do I got to use promoted posts. It's simpler than all that. Those are just the tools. Those are just the final details in the tools. What you want to become is be known as the blank man, or the blank woman, or the blank person. You want to own a word. Not to everyone, just to the people who matter, just to the small niche of your marketplace. So yell out, I'm just going to show a few here. I'm going to show the blank man, the blank woman, or the blank person, and I want you to yell out their name. The 4-hour guy, Tim Ferriss, the whole room. The vulnerability woman, Brene Brown. The why guy, Simon Sinek. And the hustle guy, Gary Vee, right? So you guys knew that just by knowing the word. What I want you guys to think about with regard to your personal brand is not the tools and the tactics and how you get the word out. What's the word that you want to own? And then don't worry about owning it at a Gary or at a Simon level. Worry about owning it to the 1,000 people in your industry that actually matter. There's lots of ways to do it. There's lots of bricks in the wall. But the thing is, there's no blueprint to do this. There's no one way to do this. Take Seth Godin, for instance. He barely uses most of this stuff, but the one on the bottom left, the blog, he does better than anyone. He hasn't missed a day in 18 years or whatever. So there's no one platform and tactic way to do it. Start by thinking, what's the word that you want to own? And then where do those people live? The intersection you want to think about is, where do those people live? And what's a tool or a platform that you're excited to do? If you're not a writer, don't choose blog. If you can't stand being on video, don't choose YouTube. We talked a little bit about referability. How well do your friends know what you do? was at a mastermind once, and someone introduced themselves to someone else, and they had known it. They introduced themselves to the group, and the other guy said, and he'd known this guy for years. He said, "Dude, that's what you do? I had no idea. I've known you for 7 years. I didn't know that's what you did." And the guy said, "Yeah." He said, "People ask me for that 3 times a week. 3 times a week for 7 years, this guy wanted to send leads, warm intros to this guy, and he didn't because he just didn't know that that's what he did and who he served." I have a theory. None of you need a single new stranger as a customer if the 100 people in your phone or the 1,000 people in your phone really knew what you do, who you help, and how. If the people who, do they know well enough to listen for referral cues because they want to help you? We try so hard to get word of mouth from random strangers on the internet, and yet our girlfriend's uncle has no clue what we do, and somebody's asking him for exactly that. So don't just let them, make it easy for them. When I say I help entrepreneurs fund their dreams, my friends know to listen for Kickstarter and Indiegogo and crowdfunding and New Idea and Need Funding, or I'm launching an app. And they say, "You got to talk to Clay." Like Seth says, famous to the family. You don't need to be famous to everyone. You're not trying to be famous to the whole world. You just want to be famous to the family. And what he means by this is, who are the 1,000 people that care? So that's a motorcycle. What's next to the motorcycle? Sidecar, yes. So Gary Vee goes on Twitter and on social media, and he mostly talks about hustle and personal branding and entrepreneurship, and he talks a lot about that type of content. But then he also talks about the New York Jets. 10% of his content is about the New York Jets. That's because that's his sidecar interest, and it allows people, most people who follow Gary can't engage with him. They can't hire him. They don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire VaynerMedia. Maybe once every 2 or 3 years they can buy his book, but that's about it. So he talks about the Jets because he's a fan of the Jets, but it also gives them an opportunity to engage. So sometimes on social I'll talk about coffee. Like I said, I'm a huge coffee geek, and I was at a conference at an adult summer camp in upstate New York, and one of my friends knew I was into coffee, and he said, "Dude, bring your favorite bag, I'll bring my favorite bag, and we'll trade." So in the Adirondacks of upstate New York, I did a coffee drug deal with my friend because he knew my sidecar interest was coffee. And sometimes people will know this, and they'll send me boxes of coffee afterwards. It's a cheap and fun way for me to engage with people around something that's not my core content. When you're talking about marketing content and social and things like that, the mistake too many people make is they post "look at me" content. Look at this fancy dessert I'm having at this fancy restaurant, as opposed to learn from me content, which is what you want to be posting in your industry. 90% of it should be learn from me content, and then 10% talk about your sidecar interest. Let's talk about personal taglines and hashtags. My friend Nick Onken is an amazing photographer. He's photographed tons of celebrities, Justin Bieber, Usher, all sorts of folks. And so Nick likes this phrase, "create your moments." Like, don't let life happen to you. Go out there and create your moments. And Nick basically owns this phrase because when he's on a podcast, he'll just ask. Anyone who has you on a podcast, they need a title for that podcast. You have to have a title to post it to iTunes. So Nick just makes a super simple ask and says, "Is it okay if we title it Create Your Moments with Nick Onken?" And they say, sure, they need a title anyway. And now when you Google Create Your Moments and Nick Onken, you see all of his podcast interviews because they're all titled the same. He also uses it as a hashtag on Instagram, Create Your Moments. So from your personal brand perspective in your business, think about what's the thing that you want to own? What's the phrase that you want to own in the way that Nick owns Create Your Moments? All right, and last, I want to talk about designing better conversations. We talked about in the beginning, your intro is the first part to a conversation. It's a tennis match. It's going to go back and forth. So Danny could say, "I show experts how to teach their gift." That's the beginning of a question. Now, notice, just like this, or just like I help entrepreneurs fund their dreams, or Mitch could say, "I help leaders see the future," it gives you a little bit. It gives you a taste, but it's not so complete. You need to know more. And so your intro should prompt a question. They should be interested and intrigued and a little bit unclear. They should say, "What do you mean?" Or "How do you do that?" When I used to say I help entrepreneurs fund their dreams, people would say, "Oh, what kind of entrepreneurs?" Some people would say, "What kind of dreams?" Other people would say, "Are you a VC?" And it doesn't matter what the question is, because then you get to say, let me tell you a story. This is what you want to get to. The whole point of a perfect intro is it gets them to ask that question, so what do you do? And it allows you to say, well, let me tell you a story. It allows you to connect over story, your story, but more importantly, the story of who you help. I call this a case story. So it's not a case study. Case studies can be useful, but they're often pretty boring to read. I call this a case story of your favorite client, your favorite customer. Our brains love stories. Think about all the stuff that we buy. What we buy is stories. Who here is familiar with the brand of coolers called Yeti, Y-E-T-I? Hands? Yeah, a whole bunch of people. Yeti is one of my favorite brand stories ever, because 10 years ago, nobody had a cooler problem. The beer was not getting warm. The sandwiches were not spoiling. Nobody had a cooler problem. The Coleman 5-day cooler that you could get at Walmart for $33 worked perfectly to keep your food cold. Nobody had a cooler problem, and Yeti came along and they built a $1 billion cooler brand because they told a better story. It's the ultimate brand story. So Yeti's this big white cooler, and they have black rubber tie-downs and everything else. But the story of the Yeti cooler is, one of the stories that they planted as they built the entire brand over 10 years, is that their cooler is grizzly-proof. So they used YouTube, and they filled a Yeti cooler with a bunch of steaks and hamburger and meat and stuff, and then they put the tie-downs, and they put it in the woods where the grizzly bears are, and then they did the same with the Coleman cooler. And of course, the grizzly bears were able to destroy the Coleman cooler and get at the food, and they were frustrated and couldn't get at the food in the Yeti. And so the little viral video, the little tagline was, it's grizzly-proof. Now, they knew that the point was not to be grizzly-proof. That's not a problem that most cooler owners occur. In fact, Yeti's based in Austin, Texas, and there's not a grizzly bear within 1,000 miles of Austin, Texas. But they told a story because they knew that people who buy coolers like a Yeti and spend more to pay for Yeti, fishing guides and hunting guides, well, they need a story about their cooler. They need something to brag about. They need to say, hey, Mitch, my cooler's grizzly-proof. Is yours? And if I have the Coleman, now I have to go get a Yeti because my cooler's not grizzly-proof, and I have to pay more. And yes, it's a better cooler. People, whenever I tell that story, people say, well, Clay, you don't really understand. I have a Yeti, and it really is a lot better cooler. Okay, the Coleman's $33. Let's pretend that the Yeti is 3 times as good as the Coleman, so it should cost $100. The difference between the $100 it should cost and the $300 it does cost is what I call story math. That's the differential between, that's the value of the story, the additional value that owning a Yeti gets you. We're the kind of person that has a cooler like that. So all branding is about storytelling and telling the right stories to the right people. Our brains love stories. Literally, a different part of our brain lights up when we're told a story. We seek out stories. When someone says, so what do you do? They don't even know it, but what they're begging for you to do is to tell them a story. Netflix, Game of Thrones, it's all stories. There is no Netflix of press releases. Or as my friend Christopher Penn says, no kid ever said, Mommy, please read me a press release. So if I'm talking about the crowdfunding and someone says, so what do you do? And I say, I help entrepreneurs fund their dreams. It doesn't matter if they say, are you a VC? What kind of entrepreneurs? What kind of... It doesn't matter what the question is. What I say is, and I don't usually have visual accompaniment, but I say, well, let me tell you a story. When Lee Miller first came to me, he was trying to launch this product on Kickstarter. It was like this, about this big, and it kind of looked like a futuristic lava lamp with a laser and an app, and it allowed people to play with their cats even when they're not home. And then I say, are you a cat person or a dog person? So before I go on and on and on into my case story, I pause and loop them back into the conversation and say, are you a cat person or a dog person? And everyone's one or the other, and it doesn't matter. We have an interesting riff about that. And then I say, so when Lee wanted to ask, he said, will this succeed on Kickstarter? I said, it will if you do the pre-marketing right. I said, how many emails do you have? And Lee looked at me funny, like he didn't understand the question. He said, 2. I use one for work and one for personal. And I was like, no, how many emails have you collected about people that are interested in Kidio? And he literally blank-faced did not know what I meant. So Lee and I worked together. We built a landing page. that worked, converted at 40%. We promoted it in the right places. And while the industrial design firm was making Kitio, over 6 months, Lee gathered 13,000 pre-launch opt-in emails so that when he launched on Kickstarter, he was fully funded in 36 minutes, 200% funded on the first day, and raised $270,000 for his cat device and his invention. And now you can buy it in Best Buy and Pet Value. So that's what I do. I appreciate the applause. The point of the story was I get to explain what I do through the success of my client or customer, right? This is the case story. Relatively short, right? I didn't go on and on and on about Lee, but you understand that he's an inventor with an idea, and he was a little bit lost in the beginning, and then we built this landing page, but I made it all about him, not about me. I didn't say I'm a crowdfunding strategist or here's the brilliant strategy that I came up with. It was all about Lee's success, and I want you to do the same with your clients and your customers. When so-and-so first came to me, when Jill first came to me, she was struggling with this. And we worked together and did this, and then it's all about Jill and Jill and Jill and Jill and her success, and then at the end, you just end with, so that's what I do, or that's what we do. This is how to explain what your business does through the case stories of your clients and your customers. I know it's quiet, and you guys all just finished some lunch, but you're all introducing yourselves right now. I don't mean on the break before, I mean right now. Because someone's on your website, someone's opening an email from you and reading your email signature, someone is on your social media. You're introducing yourself constantly. The 1,000 per year, that's just in person when someone verbally says, so what do you do? It's way more than that if you include all these digital interactions. Your website headlines, someone's on your website right now. This is my friend Anton, he says, we help startups build amazing apps. Now, this is also Anton's headshot. And if you want an amazing app built, you may or may not trust this guy to build it for you. But the headline works pretty well on his website for Gunpowder Labs. He just says we help startups build amazing apps, shows one-color logos of the companies he's worked with, and it's relatively trustworthy. Social media bios, another great Canadian, Dan Martell. He says, I help entrepreneurs build technology products that change the world. That's his perfect intro. It's also his Twitter bio. Your business cards. Now, business cards are kind of interesting over the last few years. Some people like them, some people don't, some people hate them. I don't care whether you use them or not, but if you use them, back to the whole point about stories, if you use business cards, use them to tell a story. And there's only one company I know that allows you to do this really, really well. It's called moo.com. Because, yes, Moo fans, it's not about the paper or the thickness or the lux of Moo cards. It's the fact that Moo's the only company I know that if you order a pack of 50, the back of all your 50 cards can be different. So the front of my business card is the same, but the back of my business card, this is Neen James, a good friend of mine and a fellow speaker. She says, I help people listen with their eyes. Or Laura Gassner-Otting says, I help leaders get unstuck. The backs of my business cards are 50 different stories of people like Neen and Laura and Mitch and their perfect intro. So when someone says, do you have a business card? I say, sure. Which one would you like? And I'm basically walking around with my portfolio. You see how the story of what I do is in my pocket. And then if they want their own, then we can have a conversation. A framework I like, I know we showed Anton's with We Help Startups, but if it's on your website, I actually don't like using we or I. If they're already on your website, I like this framework I call verb your noun. Because they're on your website. Saying we or I is kind of like introducing yourself at your own Thanksgiving dinner. But verb your noun, so full context is know your customers, grow your business. Verb your noun is the end of your perfect intro, but flipped around. Remember, it's not about you, it's about who you help and what they want. So users of full contact want to know their customers better so that they can grow their business. And I know that you guys are all here, a lot of you are here because you're building a course with Danny or Course Builders Laboratory. Verb your noun works really well for course names. So if I say I help entrepreneurs fund their dreams, I could say, you guys like that? I stayed up all night doing that for you. Fund your dream is just the end of the perfect intro flipped. Verb your noun. So fund your dream is a really good course name for crowdfunding, or it's a good website headline. If someone wants to do Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and the headline on the website says, fund your dream, they're going to do the next action. So the only job of a website headline or tagline is to get them to go to the next step. It's not to complete the sale. Nobody's going to read your headline and say, yup, and pay you. But if they keep reading, you win. That's the goal. That's the job that your headline has. So verb your noun, if you understand your customer and what they actually want, that gets them to go to the next step. So now I want you to forget the words. We've talked a lot. I saw some of you scribbling your perfect intro or your verb, your noun. Maybe you're designing your business cards. I want you guys to forget the words, forget the framework, and just think about what it is that you get to do every day. And if you could summarize that in just a few words and communicate that passionately to the person in front of you, who wouldn't want to do business with you? Thank you. So I've got about 3 minutes for Q&A, 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'm going to let you guys go. Yeah?
Hi, Jeanette Ampson.
Hi, Jeanette.
People are saying now, rather than use the word help, people hire me to, so that there's more authority as opposed to the beneficent charity. What do you think about that?
I think hire is too much about you. If you explain what you do really well and you explain that story, of course Lee Miller, I didn't work for Lee Miller for free. So people hire me is kind of like the I or I am. It turns it back to you. I would actually, so tell me more about what you do. We'll just workshop it real quick. What do you do?
Entrepreneurs hire me to figure out their why, so that they can message what they're doing in a way that gets people to lean in.
Okay, so I would just say I help entrepreneurs find their why or figure out their why. Yeah. Yeah.
Our company is called Prima Materia Institute, means prima materia in Latin is the beginning of everything.
Okay.
Beginning to think and draw. But we connect art and science.
Can you speak up the dishes, or sorry, the beginning of everything?
Beginning of, we connect art and science. We help adults to learn to draw and paint. What would be a better name for the company instead of Prima Materia? Because everybody kind of, it's hard to remember for Americans.
Yeah, because so the prima materia, is that what you said?
Prima Materia.
So it's Latin. So step number 1, maybe don't name your company in Latin if you're trying to do business in current day. You help them learn art and creativity so that they can what?
That they can understand how the world works visually.
What?
To connect art and science.
So what if your company was named Paint Your Future?
Paint your future.
Yeah. What's that? Oh, sure. So we got time for maybe 1 or 2 more, and then I gotta let you guys go.
So you said that it's a good idea to get people asking. Louder. I think this is not. So you said it's good to ask a question soon after saying like your first sentence or two. What if, in cases like mine, it's about talking about really vulnerable things? Like I was in a Lyft ride this morning on the way over here.
Sure.
What if you aren't sure if people are ready to be asked those vulnerable questions?
So that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. One way to do that is to ask them a question. Do you know anyone who has, have you ever, ... right? And it brings them into the conversation. So I used the example with Lee Miller just really briefly of like dropping in one of these engaging questions. Her question was, what if you're not sure if someone's ready to go really deep on a really vulnerable topic? You can make it not about them and about their friend. You could say, have you ever had someone who went through that sort of situation or transformation? And then it's kind of like asking for a friend. They can talk about themselves in the context of their friend, which feels safer. Cool. Last one more. Yeah. The word help works really good for nonprofits, right? We help bring clean water to whatever. What's the nonprofit? What do you do? Yeah. Sure. Sure. So we help reconnect families, blah, 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 all right? Or we rebuild, or we, Okay. So we tell the stories of families who X, right? Think about it. The thing that people always get hung up on is they get hung up on explaining the how they do it, whether that's TV or social media or whatever. Think about the benefit. The how doesn't really matter. It's not about the crane. It's about building a place to live, right? So in your case, it's about the benefit of what they actually get. Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.